Hello folks, I just thought I'd do a quick video to acknowledge the sad passing of Loretta Lynn, who's died at the age of 90. She's had an incredible career spanning 7 decades and is a hugely influential country singer, especially for the female country singers that would come after her. She grew up in Butcher Holler, Kentucky. Her original name was Loretta Webb. And her father was a miner, and she grew up in a very poor working class community. And over again during her career, she would sing about the troubles and the problems that poor working class women go through, and that would be one of the things that would define her career, probably. I've got about 30 of her albums, which is probably a small proportion of the number that she's released over her career. But this is the earliest one I've got, 1965. This is Blue Kentucky Girl, which is a lovely record, but it's probably not quite. She's probably not quite found her feet, or at least the producers don't quite know what to do with her yet. She's got one of her own songs on here. Of course, Blue Kentucky Girl, Emmylou Harris would cover that, and one of her albums would be called Blue Kentucky Girl, which is clearly a nod of the head to Loretta Lynn. So that's 65. The next one I've got, 66. This is more what you expect. This is You Ain't Woman Enough, and this is where we get a feisty woman that's gonna, she's not gonna. If you think of, I know this is before Dolly Parton's Jolene. You Ain't Woman Enough is almost like the antithesis of that song. This is someone saying, if you think you're going to take my man, it ain't going to happen. It's funny to put those two together. But this is where she starts to come together. It's a great record, this one. Great tunes on it. More of her songs on it. I think there's 4 of her songs on here, 5 of her songs. The Darkest Day by her is great. Check that one out. So that's 66. 67, we've got Don't Come Home a Drinking with Lovin' on Your Mind. And this, again, it's that sort of no-nonsense woman that's going to stand up for herself, despite what men are going to be like. And this album kind of takes that and runs with it. We've got lots of songs on here which are basically putting men on the spot. We've got The Devil Gets His Dues, Saint to Sinner. What's the... Get what you got and go. And so 67. So that's what she's done. But also in 67, which is kind of interesting, is this record, which is Singing with Feeling. And this is almost like the opposite side of that record. This is her almost presenting herself as a more vulnerable person. If Don't Come Home a Drinking is a hard woman, this is a woman with a heart that can be broken. And they sit nicely together. But again, songs by her on here, a couple of them. Unfortunately, the number of records that Nashville would want to put out from artists would mean that there's very little chance that that someone could be able to, if they were releasing four albums a year, to produce that many songs for that many albums was very difficult. So unfortunately, with a lot of country artists, you don't get. There's a lot of filler. Early on, it's great because you get the great writers being used, but later on, that's not quite the case. This was released. This is Here's Loretta. This was released in 1968, but it's some of her earlier recordings that she recorded for the Vocal Lion. I can't remember how you pronounce it. Vocalion. I also think it's Vocal Lion, but it's not a Vocal Lion. It's Vocalion. So these are early recordings, but they are all written by her. So that's an essential record to pick up. She's finding her feet, but it's a great set of songs. 1970, she released Coal Miner's Daughter, which would probably be her career-defining song, her signature tune, autobiographical. And of course, it would also be the title of her autobiography, which would become a film in 1980 with Sissy Spacek playing Loretta Lynn and getting the Oscar for doing so. It's a good album. It's probably not one of her best. It would be better if it followed The Coal Miner's Daughter and was it's almost like would be better if it was a sort of an autobiographical album, but it isn't quite. You get covers of Snowbird and things like that, and we really don't need that. But you know, you need Coal Miner's Daughter in your collection. Now, I mentioned earlier about the sort of the subject matter that she would tackle, and this is from 1973, Entertainer of the Year, and you see it's got featuring Rated X. Now, this is one of the songs that she wrote. That's one of those sort of pointing out the hypocrisy of the way women are treated differently to men. That men can go out and sleep with loads of women and they're just a stud. They're a bit of a lad. But not quite so much for women. And Rated X was banned with a lot of radio stations as a result of that kind of message that was being put out. That's one of her songs. One that wasn't one of hers, but she kind of made her own, is a song called "The Pill," which is on this album from Back to the Country. This is 1975. Again, another song that would be banned by radio stations. Because it talks about the pill. I mean, you know, clearly people weren't talking about it. And she was going to places that other people didn't. You know, the pill was a huge thing for working class people, you know. By 1975, she was trying different things. This is, They Don't Make 'Em Like My Daddy. And this has a bit more sort of rocky sounds to it. There's a track called Trouble in Paradise, which is great. Got some great guitar by Grady Martin. And it's actually written by Kenny Odell, who wrote Behind Closed Doors for Charlie Rich. So Trouble in Paradise has a kind of a rocky feel that wouldn't sound out of place on one of the Rolling Stones sort of country-ish albums. So that's a good one to pick up. Of course, she was in the 70s the biggest female country music star, and that's partly due to the fact that she had a string of hits with Conway Twitty, Louisiana Woman, Louisiana Man. Is it that way round? I can never remember if it's that way round. I apologize if I've got that wrong. This is from 1971. This is We Only Make Believe. And you must have this one because this has got Picking Wild Mountain Berries, the cover of the R&B tune, and they really make it their own. Cracking tune, and it's great. I mean, I like country duets, and so, you know, Loretta and Conway Twitty, they're probably the pinnacle of it, really. In the 80s, things kind of go a bit downhill, really. New artists are coming in. The old guard are sort of going out of favour, and it doesn't really help matters when she's releasing albums that like this one. This is called Looking Good. And why is she looking good? Well, she's looking good because she's wearing country clothes by Loretta Lynn. Her clothesline, not a clothesline. Her line of clothes. You know what I mean? It's almost like the music is secondary to her trying to sell some clobber clothes. Clobber? You don't use that in America. So yeah, this would be the last top 10 album that she would have in 1982, I believe. This is still produced by Owen Bradley, who produced all of her classic albums, but by this point, nah. There's some horrible production sounds on here. But there are some good tunes on here. There's a good version of There Stands the Glass, which Webb Pierce had a hit with. But yeah, not one of her better albums, and it's not surprising that this would be her last top 10 hit. Through the 90s, even she released probably a handful of albums, three or four maybe. I to be honest, I haven't heard those. I'm not sure what they're like. I can only imagine. They didn't really sell or were successful. I must try and find them and see what they do sound like. But she would find a new lease of life in the 2000s when she released this with Jack White's production, Vanlia Rose. There's a great picture of them on the back with Jack White. There he is. Yeah, it's a really good album. It's rocky in places, obviously, because Jack White's bringing his thing, but it's also country. It's sort of an entry level for people who don't really like country or don't know where to start with country. It's a good entry drug. I like the track Portland, Oregon, which is a duet between the two of them. And the interesting thing about it is that normally when you get a country duet, like with Conway Twitty, he's the one with the low voice, she's the one with the high pitched voice. It's flipped on its head with with a duet with Jack White. She's into her 70s, maybe early 80s, but no, 70s I think when this. Yes, she's in her 70s, so her voice has got quite husky. It's a bit lower, and then Jack White's got the higher pitched voice, so that's kind of funny. But it clearly gave her a new lease of life, and in the same way that Johnny Cash was revitalized with the records that were produced by Rick Rubin, his American Recordings releases. Loretta Lynn, more recently, would do a very similar thing. She released 3 albums, all produced by John Carter Cash, Johnny Cash's son. So clearly he was paying attention to his father's career. And this is Full Circle from, I believe, 2016. And this is a folky country acoustic record. It's great. It's got Elvis Costello on it. It's got a duet with Willie Nelson, but it really focuses on her, and it showcases her at her best. She is great. After the sort of dodginess of the 80s and the failing career, while it might not have sold, in the levels that her 60s and 70s records were selling, this is very popular with the sort of a younger crowd, like myself. I'm just talking rubbish now. I haven't got the second one she did, but the last album she did was released last year, 2021. It had been recorded earlier, but she had a stroke, unfortunately, and they held it back after that. So it was released last year, and it's great. Again, it's very much that folky country acoustic thing. It's got duets with Reba McEntire and Carrie Underwood, and she really holds her own. In fact, if between you and me, I think she blows them away. And it's nice to see she's got a duet with Margot Price, so there's a sort of a nod to the new generation of singers. And you've got Tanya Tucker on here as well. And these are all artists that owe a debt. And this is, of course, called Still Woman Enough, which is harking back to the You Ain't Woman Enough. And believe me, Loretta Lynn was more than woman enough throughout her career. And I would say go for the early stuff or the later stuff. You can't go wrong with this. A great artist, and it's a sad loss. There's not many of the old guard left. Anyway, I just thought I'd do that. Yeah. See you, Loretta. Bye-bye.